Hello, and thank you for joining us today for MMFCU's Getting Financially Vulnerable with Your Partner. My name is Jackie Lopez, and I'm the marketing manager at the credit union. Joining us today, we have Andrea Gideon. She's the financial literacy coordinator at Springfield Technical Community College. Her goal today is to highlight the important conversations couples must have when it comes to finances. So, welcome, Andrea.
Thank you for having me again. I'm so happy to be here and I'm very excited to bring this new topic to you guys today. And please feel free, like Jackie had mentioned in the beginning, jot down your questions, put them in the chat so that way we can have, a very nice conversation at the end. And let me know what you think. I got to say, in doing the research for this, I learned quite a bit myself too. So I'm hoping that I'm able to share some of that with you guys today. All right, so we will get started. As you can see, the topic is financial literacy. And some of you might be asking, like, what does that mean? So financial intimacy refers to the level of trust and comfort that couples have when discussing and managing their finances together. It's a measure of how open and honest partners are with each other about their financial goals, their habits, and their challenges. Couples with a high financial intimacy are able to talk openly and honestly about money, share their financial goals and dreams, and work, keyword, together to achieve them. They have a shared understanding of their current financial situation, including income, expenses, debt, savings, and are able to make decisions together that align with their shared values and priorities. On the other hand, a couple with low financial intimacy may have difficulty discussing money and may have different views on spending and saving and may not have a clear understanding of their shared financial situation. This can lead to conflicts, mistrust, and ultimately financial stress. It's important to take this topic of conversation into consideration because the person that you are with, ideally, is a person that you are looking to spend life with, right? And you're going to make a bulk of your biggest financial decisions with this person, from getting married or moving in together, getting married, and even buying a home, and another one, having children. All very big financial responsibilities. So first two steps requires two steps. The first is to watch their actions as it relates to money. So pay attention to their lifestyle. Are they a spender or are they more frugal? Do you see them looking for sales rather than always paying full price? Small things like that is key to pay attention to. Another thing is pay attention to who pays for dates. Not to say that, if one is paying more than the other, that the person who's spending more is not financially sound, but you want to make sure that the relationship is balanced from the beginning, or at least how you guys have it set up is how it's intended to be throughout the duration of the relationship. And then also pay attention to the type of gifts that are given and received. If someone is spending, an exorbitant amount of money on lavish gifts, that might go to show you that they are more of a spontaneous spender or just a spender maybe without caution, especially if their income doesn't allow such gifts. And then it might cause further thinking into how are they affording this? Are they putting it on a credit card? Are they borrowing money? So those are definitely things to pay attention to as far as actions. The next step is that you want to consider having a full frontal financial meeting. This is where you guys sit down. You can make it a date night, taco night, something similar. Sit down, discuss your salaries, your debt and the types of debt, credit scores, credit reports, and financial goals. This is your opportunity to just put everything out there and share it with no judgment. Now, I know that this can probably feel overwhelming for people who have kept their finances separate throughout the duration of their relationship, and that's normal. Well, the feeling of overwhelming is normal, but it's also can be confirmation that you both are moving in the right direction. So before moving in or making proposals, if you haven't done that already, consider having this conversation first, as it could save a lot of time and money in the end. All right. So the next step I figured we talk about is the talk, right? How to have that talk. What questions should be included in the talk? So kicking off this conversation doesn't have to be awkward. You can start off by asking the very simple question of what does your future look like? Like realistically, right? Where do you want to live? What type of ideal job would you have? And hence the salary that that job would pay would give you an idea of the lifestyle you guys would be able to afford, right? Do you want to own a home or would you prefer to rent? That's another big one, especially given the climate that we're in right now. Do you want to live in the city or do you want to live in the suburbs? Kids or no kids, and this includes pets. Some might disagree, but pets are definitely a not only a serious commitment, but they can be a very big financial responsibility as well. Do you want to live close to family or do some prefer to live far, far away from family? How do you see your traveling or vacationing in the future? Do you intend on caring for your parents once they are in old age? That could be a very big determinant in a relationship as far as financial compatibility. And then lastly, how do you handle money and family? And by that, I mean, when you have a cousin who comes and asks for money, you know, it'd be important for the couple to discuss how that's going to be handled beforehand, rather than having to be reactionary to it afterwards. All right, and then we have some of these more open-ended questions. Like, for example, do you have any current financial obligations? There are those people out there who tend to think that, you know, well, if I don't open the mail, I don't have to see the bill, and then it's not really a bill that I need to pay. And that's not necessarily the case. The bill's still there. So asking if about any financial obligations is important, i.e. student loan debt, alimony from a previous marriage that you're required to pay and for how long, any child support that might be summoned against you and what those amounts look like, how long before that child support would meet its requirements. Did you co-sign on any mortgages? Or did you have any mortgages as a primary even? Credit card debt is another one. It seems to be that credit card debt right now is one of the leading causes of debt in the United States. Right there neck and neck with student loan debt. So that's another very important one. All right. And then next is, do you have an emergency fund and is it fully funded? As I've mentioned in the previous webinar that I did with MassMutual, it used to be that you only had to have 3 months of savings for an emergency. But we quickly learned through COVID that that isn't nearly enough. And now the suggested time frame is 6 to 8 months. And that is 6 to 8 months of your full monthly income of what it would take to sustain you for that time frame if you lose your job and have no other means of, you know, sustainability. 6 to 8 months. So some people could have started an emergency fund, got distracted, or life happened and they had to stop contributing to it. But then now that fund is not, sufficient enough to carry them through. So definitely take a look into the emergency fund, figure out how much is in there and how far would that get you guys in the event, that you needed it. And then another great question to ask is ask what their financial goals are. So a short-term financial goal, some people might have a plan to make a renovation in the house. Some people might have a short-term goal of going on a vacation even. Have that conversation of what that would look like and how, like what their action plan is to obtain or achieve that particular goal. And then ask them for a long-term goal. Some people want to be able to retire by a certain age. It's definitely considered a goal. Other people might want to make a long-term goal, saving up for a second home or even a first home or vacation home. So have that conversation and see how you guys align with respects to that. All right, so this slide was pretty interesting when I was putting it together. It's called prenup, postnup, potato. So fun fact, did you know technically everyone already has a prenup? I didn't know that. It's simply the bylaws that are currently set in place by your state of residence when a couple gets divorced. So if you don't have your own prenup, that is, the state rules are going to dictate how to split assets and etc. So prenups are considered private and only the couple involved know the details. Each party should be represented by their own attorney, and prenups could turn into a postnup if the agreement is made after the wedding. Couple of other things I learned about prenups is, let me see here. Oh, here we are. So one of the things I learned about a prenup is it must also contain what's called a schedule of property that is affected by the contract. This is more commonly referred to as a full financial disclosure from both parties. And in Massachusetts, a prenup must be written. Unlike some other types of contracts, verbal prenups are not valid under Massachusetts law. If one party challenges the validity of a prenup during a divorce, then a judge is required to look at several factors to determine whether it was reasonable and fair at the time that the prenup was signed. Some of the things that he looks at are whether both parties signed the prenuptial agreement voluntarily without coercion or threats, whether each party had the opportunity to review the agreement, consult with an attorney, and or negotiate conditions before signing. Another is whether one or both parties had their own legal representation, whether both parties completely and truthfully disclosed all assets and liabilities to each other at the time of the prenup. Now, although a lawyer is not required for a prenup, having legal counsel will increase the likelihood that the agreement would be upheld. Now you're wondering, like, why would I ever need to sign up for a prenup in the first place? A few reasons for completing a prenup would be to protect assets for children from previous relationships. Another is to set out the method for dividing premarital assets, to protect an individual's inheritance or interest in the trust. In doing this research, I had seen where a couple that was married, the wife had acquired an inheritance from a deceased relative, and it came with a substantial amount of money. And when they went through the divorce, because she didn't have a prenup to allocate how to handle inheritances, her husband ended up with 25% of the money that was left to her. So definitely a good reason to have a prenup in place. Another is to protect a person's interest in a business or professional practice. To reduce costly litigation in the event of a divorce. And then to specify the method for dividing premarital debts. I think that's another key one, is so that it's understood if the marriage were to absolve, how would we go about handling, debt that you had before we joined together, debt that we acquired while together. It would give it an opportunity to just lay that all out on the line. So hopefully you guys were able to learn something from that slide, because I know that I sure did. All right, next we have the 5 key elements for financial stability. So the first is equality. Both partners should have equal say in financial decisions. People tend to think that because one person makes more than the other, that one person's weight holds, heavier in the decision making. And in my research, it's been determined that in order for the relationship to be successful, that should not be held as truth. Both parties should be able to give their say and it hold equally in regards to financial decisions. Next is inclusivity, joint participation in the management of finances. And this basically means no one person is in charge. My previous job, I worked as a financial analyst, and part of my job that I had taken on was handling the death benefits for life insurance for people, employees, that have passed on. And I couldn't tell you how many, primarily wives, I spoke with to let them know that they had a death benefit, and how they weren't prepared to handle the acquisition of that kind of money. And time again, it was a resounding thing. Oh, my husband always took care of the finances. Oh, my husband is the one that always paid the bills. I don't really know how to go about this. So while it may seem or feel like it's just easier if one person handles it, if you want the relationship to be successful, you want for everyone's participation to be at the table. All right, next is transparency, and that's information around finances should be shared openly, meaning if you have an extreme amount of debt, not only putting 1 or 2 of your debt items on the table, but laying it all out. So that way the other person, the spouse, has the ability to see the full picture. As I had mentioned in a previous slide. For example, after funds are deposited into a joint account for expenses, you could talk about how much you have left over for personal expenditures, rather than, you have your account, I have my account, and we don't share or talk anything about what we have saved. Next would be sustainability, which is the ability to stick to the plan long-term. As I tell my students a lot with regards to budgeting, it's not a, one and done kind of deal. You don't make a budget, you do your budget, and then you never have to go back and check your budget. Same thing with this. Even though you may have created a plan, things change, life happens, right? And so you need to make sure that time is scheduled in the calendar for you to go back and check and adjust your plan. How is it working? How could we improve it? Are things that we were saving for no longer important to us? Should we change the plan to save for other things instead? You want to have those kind of discussions to make sure that you're able to stick to it. And then lastly, we have flexibility. Be willing to adapt as needed to ensure the success of the plan. Sounds similar to sustainability, but flexibility is knowing also that whatever you might have set up may not be the best way to go about it. And how flexible are you with trying a different method? Sometimes outside the box ideas work the best. So be flexible in your approach or your thinking pattern to your plan to ensure its longevity. All right. Oh, one thing I did want to mention, and that was back on slide 5. I apologize for this. One thing I wanted to mention was when it comes to current financial obligations, you want to also ask if they are a cosigner on any of their, family members' loans or friends' loans. That seems to be another thing that's happening now. I noticed with students at the college needing cosigners in order to take out additional loan funding. So I did some research and was able to see that it is not easy to get yourself removed as a cosigner once you are put on a loan. So for example, car loans, you have to ask if there is a co-signer release option or have the primary borrower look into refinancing the loan to get you off, or they have to sell the car to get you off. When it comes to personal loans, you want to refinance the loan, or the primary borrower would need to refinance the loan or pay off the loan in order to get you off. When it comes to student loans, if the loan has a cosigner release, which not all student loans do, the primary borrower would have to start that process. Or they would have the second option of refinancing the loan. And then when it comes to the good old credit cards, so the options here are open a new card that allows balance transfers and move the debt over and close the original card, which would then close the cosigner's financial obligation. The second option would be to get a consolidation loan to pay off the card balance and then close the card. And then the third option is to pay the credit card balance and close the card. Now, remember, all of these that I mentioned are things that the primary borrower would need to do. So you can take a second and think, if I don't know that the person I'm willing to co-sign for would be willing to do these things for me to get me off, then that might be your answer that you shouldn't co-sign for them at all. All right. And I will also provide the credit union with the links that I got this information from. So if you guys want to, look into it a little further and read up on it yourselves, you are more than welcome. Okay, so back to my last slide. So the takeaway. Number 1, have a positive attitude and focus on a shared vision for the future. Number 2, set aside regular times to talk about money. Now, the earlier, the better that you start with this conversation. But I've noticed that if you make it fun, it's a lot easier to talk about. So as I mentioned at the beginning, maybe you guys go to a nice restaurant, or, you go out for a fun game, and right after the game, you guys sit down and you talk about your finances. Or maybe you cook a new meal at home that you've never made before, and then let that lead into your talk about money. Number 3, discuss your concerns and priorities. I get that this can be very difficult to bring up, especially if you're the person that has more debt than your spouse. But you definitely want to be vulnerable enough to share that. Or even vice versa. If you're the one who is seeing someone that has more debt than you and that makes you uncomfortable, that is your time to share that information. right? And then come up with a plan of how you guys see yourselves tackling that. Number 4, seek professional help if needed. This one is so key because a lot of people feel that they can handle it, but if you could handle it, you probably wouldn't be in the situation that you're in the first place, right? So they tend to not think that they need to get professional help. The second thing that I would say when it comes to seeking professional help, some people are embarrassed about their financial situation, don't want anybody else to know, but just keep this in mind. The person that you're seeking financial help from most likely has seen a situation worse than yours. So if you keep that in the back of your mind, you would hopefully that gives you some solace in that it's not that bad, or it's not as bad as you think that it might be from the outside in. Number 5, start early. As I mentioned, it's pretty self-explanatory. Number 6, listen actively and try to understand your partner's perspective. So active listening is, rephrasing what they say back to them so they feel heard, and you can retain what they say. Sometimes it's taking notes while they're talking, and just giving them that floor uninterrupted to say what they need to say. And then, if you do have questions about what you've heard, that would be the time to, tactfully respond back with your questions for clarification. Number 7, be vulnerable and dig deep to develop open and honest communication. Being vulnerable in the relationship is one of the perks of being in the relationship. So the sooner you guys have these conversations and develop that honest and open communication, the easier it then becomes going forward. Number 8, establish trust and accountability. Basically, if you trust your spouse and you give them your credit card to go make a purchase, don't make extra unnecessary purchases that weren't discussed on the card, because that could end up diminishing that person's trust in your ability to make sound decisions. But if you were to do that, be forthcoming and hold yourself accountable. Those things, go a long way in a relationship as far as trust. Number 9, share responsibilities. Again, this should not be just one person's job in the relationship. You guys should both be sitting down to see what the bills came in at every month and make those payments together. Heaven forbid, in the event that someone does become, catastrophically sick, ill, or an untimely passing, the person that was uninvolved now has no way of knowing who to pay and what to pay. And even more so, how much is needed to sustain the household on a monthly basis. And then lastly, be open to compromise. Especially if you're the breadwinner, just because you make more money doesn't necessarily mean that you have the best ideas, right? You might be really good at work and making that money, but somebody might be able to think more strategically. So be open to compromise, and be willing to take advice. All right. As always, thank you everyone for your time. This last slide has ways that you can contact MassMutual if you would like to speak to one of their financial counselors one-on-one. They have a website, a phone number, and an email address. And at this time, if anybody has any questions, feel free to throw them into the chat, and I will do my best to answer. As I always say, I don't claim to know everything, but whatever I don't know, I'm willing to do the research to find for you guys. Thank you.